The wedding dress felt like chains around Zara's body. She stood in the small, dusty room behind the community hall, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. The dress was simple white cotton. Nothing special. Nothing beautiful. Just something her aunt had found at the market for cheap. But that wasn't what made her want to cry. Today, she was being forced to marry a homeless man. A beggar her family had found living under the bridge near the market. A man with torn clothes and dirty hands. A man who smelled like the streets and had nothing to his name except a tattered blanket and a cup for collecting coins. Her family said it was her punishment. Punishment for refusing to marry the wealthy merchant who had offered a bride price. Punishment for wanting to finish her university degree instead of becoming someone's third wife. Punishment for having dreams that were too big for a girl from a poor family. If you think you are too good for a respectable man with money, her uncle had said, his eyes cold and hard, then you can marry a man with nothing. Let us see how proud you are when you are begging on the streets with him. Zara's hands trembled as she touched the simple veil on her head. She was 23 years old. She had been 2 semesters away from finishing her degree in education. She had wanted to be a teacher, to help children learn and grow, to make something of her life. But now, all of that was gone. Welcome to Wealthra Stories, where every tale reveals the truth about human character, wealth, and the power of kindness. If you love stories that teach powerful life lessons, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notification bell so you never miss an upload. Drop a comment below, telling me where you're watching from. Her aunt pushed open the door without knocking. It is time. Come. Do not embarrass this family more than you already have. Zara followed her aunt down the narrow hallway. Her legs felt weak. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. With each step, she felt like she was walking toward the end of her life. The community hall was small and nearly empty. A few relatives sat in the chairs, whispering to each other and shaking their heads. They looked at Zara with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. This is what happens to girls who think they are better than their place in life. At the front of the room stood the imam, looking uncomfortable, and beside him stood the man she was about to marry. Zara forced herself to look at him. He was tall. That was the first thing she noticed. Taller than most men she knew. His clothes were filthy and torn. His jacket had holes in the elbows. His pants were stained and frayed at the bottom. His shoes looked like they had been pulled from a garbage pile. But his face, something about his face made her pause. It was covered in dirt and a thick, unkempt beard. But his eyes were different. They were deep and dark and watching everything with a strange intensity. Not the dull, defeated eyes of a broken man. Something else. Something she couldn't quite understand. He looked at her as she approached, and for just a moment, something flickered in those eyes. Was it sadness? Anger? She couldn't tell. The ceremony was short and cold. No celebration, no joy, just words spoken quickly by an imam who wanted to be anywhere else. Her uncle signed the papers as her guardian. The homeless man made his mark with an X because, they said, he could not write his own name. And just like that, Zara became the wife of a beggar. When it was over, her uncle handed her a small bag with her few belongings. He is your husband now. You are his responsibility. Do not come back to this house looking for help. You made your choice. But I didn't choose this. Zara wanted to scream. You forced this on me. You destroyed my life because I wanted something better. But she said nothing. She had learned that her words meant nothing to these people. The homeless man, her husband, took the bag from her hands. He did not speak. He simply turned and walked toward the door. Zara had no choice but to follow. They walked through the streets of Lagos as the sun began to set. People stared at them. A young woman in a wedding dress, walking behind a filthy homeless man. Some people laughed. Others looked away in disgust. A few whispered prayers of protection as they passed. Zara felt every eye on her like knives cutting into her skin. Shame burned in her chest. Anger at her family. Anger at her culture. Anger at her life. But most of all, fear of what would happen next. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man did not turn around. He kept walking, and his voice when he spoke was rough and low. "Somewhere safe. Just walk." They walked for almost an hour, through busy streets, then quieter neighborhoods, past markets closing for the evening, past children playing in dusty yards. Finally, they reached a part of the city Zara did not recognize. Older buildings, narrow alleys, the kind of place where people did not ask questions. The man stopped in front of a small, run-down building. The paint was peeling. The windows were covered with faded curtains. It looked abandoned. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. Zara hesitated, fear rising in her throat. But what choice did she have? She had nowhere else to go. She stepped through the doorway. Inside was a single room, bare concrete floors, cracked walls, a thin mattress in one corner with a single blanket, a small table with 2 chairs, a bucket for water. Nothing else. "This is where we live," the man said, setting her bag down on the floor. Zara looked around the room, and something inside her finally broke. She sank down onto one of the chairs and buried her face in her hands. Everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed of, gone. She was trapped in a life of poverty with a man she didn't know, a man who had nothing. The man watched her for a moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was different now, softer, gentler. "I know you did not want this." Zara looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Then why did you agree to it? Why would you marry someone who was being forced?" The man was silent for a long moment. Then he moved to the other chair and sat down across from her. Up close, she could see his face more clearly. Beneath the dirt and the beard, he looked younger than she had thought. Maybe in his early 30s. "Because," he said slowly, "I needed to see something. I needed to understand something about people, about how they treat those they think are beneath them." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, looking directly into her eyes, "that sometimes the only way to find truth is to become invisible, to strip away everything that gives you power and see who shows you kindness when you have nothing to offer." Zara stared at him. The way he spoke, the words he used. This was not how a homeless beggar talked. "Who are you?" she asked. "Now, before I tell you what happened next, are you subscribed to this channel? Because what is about to happen in the next few minutes will completely shock you. The truth behind this man's identity is something you will not see coming. And if you are not subscribed, you are going to miss stories like this that reveal how the world really works. Hit that subscribe button right now, because the answer to Zara's question is about to change everything. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Now, back to the story. The man smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I am a homeless man with nothing, and that is all you need to know." He stood up and moved to the corner of the room, where a small bag sat hidden behind a piece of torn fabric. He pulled out some bread and fruit. "You must be hungry. Eat, then rest. We can talk more tomorrow." Zara took the food mechanically. She was hungry. She hadn't eaten since the morning, but her mind was spinning with questions. Nothing about this man made sense. The way he spoke, the intelligence in his eyes, the strange calmness in how he moved. That night, Zara lay on the thin mattress while the man slept on the floor near the door, his back against the wall. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Dogs barking, voices in the distance, the rumble of cars on nearby streets. She thought about her life, about the university she would never return to, about the teaching career she would never have, about the future that had been stolen from her. But she also thought about the man across the room, the homeless beggar who spoke like an educated person, who had sad, knowing eyes, who had given her the mattress while he slept on the cold floor. Who was he really? The next morning, Zara woke to find the man already gone. On the table was a note written in clear, neat handwriting. "Gone to find work. There is food in the bag. I will return before dark." Zara stared at the handwriting. Beautiful, precise. Not the scrawl of someone who could barely write. Not the mark of someone who had signed their marriage paper with an X. She stood and moved to the small cracked mirror hanging on the wall. She looked terrible. Her wedding dress was wrinkled and dirty. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were red from crying. She found a bucket of clean water near the door and a small bar of soap. She washed her face and hands, changed out of the wedding dress into the simple clothes from her bag. Then she sat down to wait. The man returned late in the afternoon. His clothes were even dirtier than before. He carried a small bag of food and some coins. "I worked at the construction site," he said. "They paid me for the day." He set the food on the table. Rice, some vegetables, a piece of fish. Simple food, but more than Zara had expected. "Eat," he said. They ate in silence, but Zara watched him carefully. The way he held his fork, the way he chewed slowly, deliberately, the way he sat straight despite the rough clothes and the dirt on his face. "You are not really homeless," she said quietly. The man stopped eating. He looked at her for a long moment. "What makes you say that?" "Your handwriting, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself. You are pretending." The man set down his fork. Then, to her surprise, he smiled. A real smile this time. "You are observant. That is good. So who are you?" He leaned back in his chair and studied her face. "If I tell you everything, it will only bring you pain. Right now, we are just two people trying to survive. The moment I speak about my past, about the career I lost, the shame will consume me again, and I need to learn to trust you before I can share that burden." Zara felt frustration rising in her chest. "You already know who I am. A girl whose family threw her away. A girl with nothing." "No," the man said, shaking his head. "I know what happened to you, but I do not know who you are. What kind of person you are when everything has been taken from you. Whether you have kindness in your heart or only bitterness. Why does that matter?" "Because," he said, and his voice was suddenly intense, "because kindness matters, character matters. How you treat people when they cannot do anything for you. That is what reveals your true nature." Zara stared at him. Then something clicked in her mind. She felt anger flash through her. "I did not force them to do this. They chose cruelty. I just provided them with an option. And now you and I are both here, in this situation. What we do with it is up to us." He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the street below. "I have spent weeks living on the streets, weeks watching how people treat those they think are beneath them. Most people looked through me like I was invisible. Some insulted me. Some threw things at me. A few gave me money, but they did it from a distance, with disgust on their faces." He turned back to look at her. "But you, when you walked past me 3 days ago in the market, before your family found me, you stopped. You looked at me like I was a human being. You gave me your lunch even though you looked hungry yourself. And when I thanked you, you smiled at me. A real smile. Like I mattered." Zara remembered that day. She had been at the market buying vegetables. She had seen the homeless man sitting against the wall, looking weak and tired. She had given him the small lunch she had packed for herself. She hadn't thought anything of it. "That was you?" "Yes. And that moment told me something about your character. It told me that beneath everything your family had done to you, beneath all the hurt and anger, you still had compassion. You still had a good heart." Tears filled Zara's eyes again, but these were different tears. "So what happens now?" "Now," he said, "we live. We survive. We see what kind of people we truly are when everything else is stripped away. And when the time is right, when I am certain that I know your heart, I will tell you who I was and how I ended up as a homeless man. And if I leave, if I walk out that door right now." The man's face grew sad. "Then I will not stop you. You are not my prisoner. You can leave whenever you want, but I think you have nowhere to go. And I think, despite everything, you are curious. You want to know how this story ends." He was right. Zara had nowhere to go. Her family had made that clear. And yes, she was curious. This strange, mysterious man who pretended to be homeless, who spoke like a philosopher, who looked at her with those deep, knowing eyes. "I will stay," she said. "For now." The man nodded. "Then let us make the best of it." Over the next 2 weeks, Zara and the man fell into a strange rhythm. Each morning, he would leave to work at construction sites or doing manual labor. Each evening, he would return with food, and sometimes a few coins. They would eat together, talk a little, then sleep in the same room but on opposite sides. Zara noticed things, small things that did not add up. The man would sometimes disappear for a few hours in the evening, saying he needed to check on something. He always returned smelling clean, as if he had bathed somewhere. His beard, while still unkempt, seemed to be carefully maintained to look wild rather than truly neglected. And his hands. His hands were rough from the work he was doing, yes. But beneath the dirt and calluses, they were the hands of someone who had been well cared for most of his life. One evening, Zara decided to test him. "The construction boss must be difficult to work for," she said casually as they ate. The man looked up at her. "Why do you say that? You come home exhausted every day. The work must be very hard." The man smiled slightly. "The work is honest. That is what matters. But you have done this kind of work before, haven't you? Before you became homeless?" The man's smile faded. He set down his food and looked at her directly. "You are still trying to figure me out. Can you blame me? You are my husband, but I know nothing about you, not even your real name." "My name is Daniel." "Is it really?" The man, Daniel, laughed. It was the first time she had heard him truly laugh. "Yes, that part is true. My name is Daniel Okonkwo." Zara felt something shift in her chest. Okonkwo, that name was familiar, very familiar. It was the name of one of the wealthiest families in Nigeria. The Okonkwo Industrial Empire, real estate, manufacturing, technology. They owned half of Lagos. But she said nothing. She just nodded and continued eating. That night, as she lay on the mattress, Zara's mind raced. Could it be true? Was this homeless beggar actually Daniel Okonkwo, the billionaire heir? The man whose face was sometimes in the newspapers standing next to presidents and governors? It seemed impossible. But the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. The way he spoke, his education, his confidence, the strange disappearances, the careful maintenance of his disguise. He was testing her character, testing whether she would treat him with kindness and respect when she thought he had nothing. The next morning, Zara made a decision. She called the name again, Daniel Okonkwo. Then she laughed at herself. What a foolish thought. As if a homeless beggar could be connected to the wealthiest family in Nigeria. She said to herself, the name was common enough. There were probably hundreds of Daniel Okonkwos in Lagos alone. Her mind was just playing tricks on her and probably false hope trying to set in. This was her reality now. This room, this life, this man who had once been educated, who had lost everything just like she had. She would not waste her energy chasing impossible fantasies. She would not torture herself with false hope. Instead, she would accept what was. She would make the best of this situation. She would find whatever happiness she could in the life that had been forced upon her. Because bitterness would only destroy her, and she refused to let her uncle's cruelty turn her into something ugly. When Daniel returned that evening, Zara had cleaned the entire room. She had used some of the coins he had left to buy supplies at the market. The floor was swept. The walls were wiped down. The small window was open to let in fresh air. Daniel stopped in the doorway, surprised. "You did this?" "We live here," Zara said simply. "We might as well make it as pleasant as possible." Something changed in Daniel's eyes. A softness, a warmth. "Thank you." Over the following days, Zara continued to make small improvements to their life. She mended Daniel's torn clothes with thread and needle she bought at the market. She found wildflowers growing in an empty lot and brought them home, putting them in a cup of water on the table. She cooked the simple food they had with care, making it taste better than it should. And she talked to him. Really talked. Not trying to extract information, just sharing her thoughts, her dreams, her memories of a life before everything fell apart. I wanted to be a teacher, she told him one evening as they sat by the small window, watching the sunset. I loved learning. I loved the idea of helping children discover the world. My parents died when I was young. Car accident. After that, I lived with my uncle's family. They never wanted me there. They saw me as a burden, but they kept me because it was their duty. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I got into university, I thought I had finally found my way out. I worked so hard. I got scholarships. I did everything right. But then my uncle decided I should marry this merchant. A man 3 times my age with 2 other wives. He said it was for the good of the family. The merchant had offered a large bride price. What did you say? I refused. I said I wanted to finish my degree first. That I was not ready for marriage. My uncle was furious. He said I was disrespecting him and the family. That I thought I was too good for them. That I needed to be taught humility. So he arranged for you to marry a homeless man. Zara nodded, tears filling her eyes. He wanted to humiliate me, to break me, to show me what happens when you have pride and ambition. Daniel was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was filled with a quiet anger. Your uncle is a fool. Intelligence and ambition are not sins, they are gifts. He tried to punish you for having the very qualities that make you strong. He turned to look at her directly. You will finish your degree, Zara. I promise you that, and you will become a teacher. This is not the end of your story. It is just a chapter, a difficult chapter, but not the end. How can you promise that? We have nothing. Daniel smiled. Sometimes having nothing is temporary, but having character, having strength, having a good heart, those things are permanent, and you have all of those things. 3 more weeks passed. Zara and Daniel's life in the small room continued, but something had shifted between them. They were no longer strangers forced together. They had become something else. Partners, friends, people who understood each other's pain and respected each other's strength. One evening, Daniel did not go out to work. Instead, he spent the day in the room, watching Zara as she moved about, cleaning and organizing. You are restless today, Zara observed. I am thinking, about what? About whether I have learned what I needed to learn. Zara's heart beat faster. And have you? Daniel stood and moved to stand in front of her. He was tall. Even in his ragged clothes, even with dirt on his face, he had a presence that filled the room. Yes, I have learned that you are exactly the person I thought you were when I first saw you in the market. You are kind, even when you have been treated with cruelty. You are strong even when everything has been taken from you. You are dignified even when the world tries to humiliate you. He reached up and slowly began to remove the dirt from his face, wiping it away with a clean cloth he pulled from his pocket. Beneath the grime, his skin was smooth and healthy. He removed the fake beard, revealing a strong jaw. He ran his hands through his hair, shaking out the dust and dirt. Zara watched in silence as the homeless beggar disappeared and someone else emerged. Someone powerful, someone confident, someone who looked exactly like the photographs she had seen in the newspapers. My full name is Daniel Okonkwo. I am the heir to the Okonkwo Industrial Empire. My family is one of the wealthiest in Nigeria. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. He looked at her with those same deep, knowing eyes. But none of that matters as much as finding someone who sees me as a human being first. Someone who would show me kindness when I had nothing. Someone whose heart is pure. Zara felt like the world was tilting beneath her feet. Why me? Why would someone like you need to do this? Because I watched my father marry 3 times. Each time, the woman wanted his money, his status, his power. None of them wanted him. None of them loved him for who he was beneath all of that. I watched him become lonely and bitter, surrounded by people who smiled at him but only saw dollar signs. Daniel stepped closer. I decided I would never make that mistake. I would find someone who showed kindness to a homeless man, someone who treated a beggar with respect and dignity, someone whose character did not depend on what they could gain. And you found me. I found you. A woman who gave her lunch to a stranger, who cleaned a dirty room not to impress anyone, but because it was the right thing to do, who mended my torn clothes even though she thought I was nobody, who talked to me about her dreams, even though she had no reason to hope I could help her achieve them. Tears streamed down Zara's face. What happens now? Now, Daniel said gently, we start our real life. Tomorrow we leave this place. We go to my real home, and I keep my promise to you. You will finish your university degree. You will become a teacher, and you will have everything you need to build the life you dreamed of. But there is one thing I need to know. Now that you know who I really am, now that you know I have wealth and power, does it change how you see me? Zara looked at him for a long moment. This man who had lived on the streets to test his future, who had endured dirt and labor and hardship to find truth, who had seen her at her lowest and chosen her anyway. No, she said softly. It does not change how I see you. You were kind to me when I had nothing. You gave me respect when my own family gave me none. You saw my strength when everyone else saw only my shame. That is who you are. The money does not change that. Daniel smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. That is the right answer. The next morning, a convoy of luxury cars pulled up outside the small rundown building. Neighbors stared in shock as bodyguards in black suits emerged, followed by assistants carrying expensive luggage. Daniel, now dressed in an immaculate suit, his hair perfectly styled, his face clean and handsome, stepped out of the lead vehicle. He looked like a completely different person, like royalty. He walked into the building and extended his hand to Zara. Ready? Zara took his hand, and together they walked out into the sunlight. The neighbors whispered and pointed. Some recognized Daniel's face from the newspapers. Others simply stared in shock at the transformation. The homeless beggar had become a billionaire prince, and the humiliated bride had become his chosen wife. They drove through Lagos in silence. Zara watched the city pass by the tinted windows. The streets she had walked as a poor girl now looked different. Not because they had changed, but because she had. Finally, they arrived at the Okonkwo family estate. It was magnificent. High walls surrounded acres of perfectly landscaped gardens. The main house was a mansion of white stone and glass, gleaming in the sunlight like a palace. But Daniel did not take her to the main house. Instead, he led her to a smaller building on the property. A guest house, he explained, private, quiet, where they could adjust to their new reality without the pressure of his family's expectations. Inside, the guest house was beautiful but not overwhelming. Comfortable furniture, large windows, everything clean and new and perfect. This is your space, Daniel said. You can rest here, recover, think about what you want to do next. There is no pressure, no demands. This marriage was forced on both of us, even if for different reasons. What we make of it now is entirely up to us. Zara looked around the beautiful room, then back at Daniel. What do you want? Daniel smiled. I want to get to know you better, the real you, not the girl who was humiliated by her family or the woman who cleaned a dirty room. But you, your thoughts, your dreams, your hopes. I want to see if what began in hardship can become something real and lasting. And if it does not, then we part as friends. I will still keep my promises to you. Your education, your career, your independence. Those are not conditional on anything except your character, which you have already proven. That evening, Zara called her mother's old friend, the only person who had shown her kindness after her parents died. The woman cried with joy when she heard Zara's voice. I am safe, Zara told her. I am well, better than well, and I need you to do something for me. 3 days later, Zara's uncle received a phone call from a lawyer representing the Okonkwo family. The family was filing a complaint with the community elders about the forced marriage and the cruelty inflicted on Zara. Additionally, they were demanding the return of Zara's portion of her parents' inheritance, which the uncle had illegally kept for himself. The uncle's face went pale as the lawyer laid out the case. He had thought he was humiliating his niece by forcing her to marry a homeless beggar. He had thought he was teaching her a lesson about pride and knowing her place. He had no idea he had married her to one of the richest and most powerful men in the country. Within a week, Zara's uncle was called before the community elders. The entire neighborhood knew about the case. Whispers spread like wildfire. The girl they had pitied was now the wife of Daniel Okonkwo. The homeless beggar was a billionaire in disguise. The elders ruled against the uncle. He was forced to make a public apology. He was required to return all of Zara's parents' property and money. And most importantly, he was shamed before the entire community for his cruelty and greed. Zara did not attend the hearing. She did not need to see her uncle's humiliation. That was not who she was. Instead, she enrolled back in university, picking up exactly where she had left off. Daniel had arranged everything. Her tuition was paid in full. She had a driver to take her to classes. She had everything she needed to succeed. But the most important thing Daniel gave her was respect. He did not demand anything from her. He did not pressure her to play the role of a billionaire's wife. He simply supported her dreams and waited to see what would develop between them naturally. 6 months passed. Zara finished her degree with honors. She was offered a teaching position at one of Lagos's best schools. Her life had been completely transformed. But more than that, her relationship with Daniel had transformed. What had started as a test, as a forced marriage, as a punishment, had slowly become something real. They talked for hours about everything: philosophy, dreams, the future. They laughed together. They challenged each other. They became true partners. One evening, as they sat in the garden watching the sunset, Daniel turned to her. "Do you remember what I asked you the day I revealed who I really was? Whether knowing about my wealth changed how you saw me?" "Yes. I want to ask you something else now that 6 months have passed, now that you have had time to build your own life and your own success, now that you are not dependent on me for anything. Do you want to stay married to me? Not because you were forced, not because I have money, but because you choose to." Zara looked at this man who had tested her, who had respected her, who had kept every promise he had made. This man who had seen her strength when everyone else saw only her shame. "Yes," she said, "I choose to stay, not because of your wealth, not because of what you can give me, but because you saw me when I was invisible, because you valued my character above everything else, because you are a good man beneath the money and the power." She reached over and took his hand. "You tested me to see if I would show you kindness when you had nothing, but you also showed me something. You showed me that true worth is not measured by what you own or what others think of you. It is measured by how you treat people when you have every reason to be bitter, by whether you remain kind when the world is cruel." Daniel smiled and squeezed her hand. "We tested each other, and we both passed." 2 years later, Zara stood in front of her classroom, teaching a group of eager children about mathematics. She was exactly where she had always dreamed of being. She was making a difference in young lives. She was using her education and her intelligence to help others. But now she had something she had never expected: a partner who valued her for who she was, a husband who had seen her at her lowest and chosen her anyway, a love that had been born from hardship and had grown into something strong and real. Her uncle never spoke to her again. Her family remained distant and ashamed. But Zara did not need their approval anymore. She had built her own life. She had proven that character matters more than status, that kindness matters more than pride. And she had learned that sometimes the worst moments of your life are actually the beginning of your greatest blessings. Because the man her family had forced her to marry as a punishment, the homeless beggar they had thrown her away with to humiliate her, had turned out to be the greatest gift she could have ever received. Not because he was rich, but because he was wise enough to value the things that truly mattered. Character, kindness, dignity, strength, and in the end, those were the things that transformed both of their lives. Zara's uncle tried to punish her with poverty, but he accidentally gave her the greatest gift of her life. Not wealth, but a man who valued her heart over everything else. The lesson is simple but powerful. How you treat people when they have nothing to offer you reveals everything about who you truly are. Your character is not shown in how you treat the powerful, but in how you treat the powerless. Now, let me ask you this. If you were tested the way Zara was tested, would your true character shine through? And if someone saw you at your absolute worst, at your lowest point, would they find kindness or bitterness? Think about that. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and I will see you in the next story.